What is the significance of Second City to you? If someone were landing on planet Earth and had no knowledge of it, you can answer this in terms of graduates, in terms of the members of your graduating class, loosely when you were there. What did you learn? What's their significance?
Well, Second City teaches the skill to improvise. And for an actor, whether you're in comedy or whether you just stay in drama, the ability to improvise within a character and trust that if you know the character well enough, you might say things, and even if it's not funny, you don't think it's going to be funny, it is going to be funny because you're within character. I think it taught a lot of the graduates that. And, you know, it really kind of started with Nichols and May. They were in the Compass Players, which became Second City, and right through Bill Murray and John Belushi and the SCTV graduates, and it continues today to Kristen Wiig and many cast members of Saturday Night Live. So it's a spectacular way of just trusting and creating a character and talking like him.
All I know about improv is what I've seen at shows. My daughter is engaged in improv, and it's harrowing. It's a high-wire act. It makes me sweat to watch it, those of us whose minds aren't wired that way. There's nothing that scares you guys. Once you've done improv, scripted comedy must feel like sliding down the ice.
Well, the idea, I think, for an actor is to make the written word sound like he's making it up. So improv just takes out the middle section. And there are tricks that you learn. You know, you learn never to deny. If someone says, gee, I hear you bought a store. You can't say, no, I didn't. You say, yes, it's a flower store. And you just keep moving along.
Right. Isn't the proper response yes and?
Yes.
I've read there are rules to improv.
When I was doing Primetime Glick, Jiminy Glick's character, and Tom Hanks was guesting on it, and Tom came out and said, and that was all improvised. And Tom came out and said, you know, Jiminy, I'm thrilled to be here, but you know what I really miss? Your daytime show. And within that second, I now had a daytime show. I said, I miss it too. That was wonderful. And now you have to just continue on thinking, oh, I wonder what my daytime show was like.
How about improv musicals? I think the most harrowing line of work there is in comedy. One person shouts out a word or phrase, and those of you who are musically inclined just begin.
Yeah, what you do is you then take a suggestion on a theme, you know, the recession. But you do it as Sinatra. Where did the money go? And the piano player's following you. What will I do for dinner? And you just go along, and you hope somehow you come up with an ending. Usually, you find your ending in your beginning. So if the first line is where did the money go, the last line would be that's where the money goes. Blackout and something in the middle, you know.
What was it about Second City? There are improv troupes and there are improv troupes, but you landed in the prime, it seems, of an incredibly, inordinately talented group.
I think, you know, my group was astounding. It was John Candy and Danny Aykroyd, Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, and Dave Thomas, etc., Joe Flaherty. They were all so talented. I don't think you ever are aware that you're in a particular group or a particular time. You know, I remember I did the show God's One, Gilda Radner's first edition, and I thought, oh, that poor thing, look at her, she's singing zippity-doo-dah, she got pigtails. I thought, boy, there's no future there. And they said, you're hired. And I thought, oh, boy, I think my song choice is incorrect. It was My Funny Valentine, you know.
Anything about Chicago that made it, you know, germane or special? What is it about the marriage of that troupe and that city?
I think Chicago is an astoundingly supportive city for comedy. I've done many shows there, many Broadway shows, tryout shows there. And I think there's something in the air, its position, relationship to Manhattan. I don't know. I just know that it's a great supportive. They love to laugh, and they kind of represent a good portion.
Can I ask you about the derivation, the roots of both Grimley and Glick?
Ed Grimley was a character I developed in Second City, Toronto. And, you know, all these characters, I think, come from people you know, or combinations of people you know. And it's kind of good that they do, because that creates, even though there might be absurdist characters, it creates a kind of three-dimension to them. And there was a guy I knew in school, and his voice always went up like that. It always did that. He wanted to be a photographer, so he would say, I took a lot of slides this weekend, but I didn't develop them because I had taken them, so I didn't really feel I needed to, almost like redundant. So then I voice like that. And then another guy knew, kind of talk like that. So I combine these voices with that voice. And suddenly Ed Grimley was talking that way. And then I used to do a scene called Sexist, where two people were applying for a job, Catherine O'Hara and I, and another person, Peter Aykroyd, Danny's brother. And Peter would say, gee, Marty, every time you come out as Ed, your hair seems to be standing higher. What are you doing there? So as a joke, I put it right up to make him laugh, and the audience went hysterical, and I thought, well, isn't that the purpose? So suddenly you had this hair going, this I must say, and it just slowly evolves.
Jiminy Glick was based on a man who lived in our street, and if you stayed off his lawn for a year, he would therefore let you to go to the movies one day.
Well, it was a bad deal,
But
we did it,
and his voice went very high and very low.
and so you kind of put that in the back of your head, and then, 30 years later, you say, I've got someone.
You mentioned a few names. Is it unfair to ask you about the all-time greats that you've crossed paths with you in your career?
I'd love to.
You've been lucky.
I have been lucky. I've been very lucky. I've worked with an amazing people. Again, John Candy was exactly, there's sometimes you meet famous people and you're disappointed because you wanted them to be someone. There's sometimes you meet famous people and you're afraid to meet them because you don't want them to not be who you'd like them to be. John was exactly the persona he played. He was generous. He was filled with life. He picked up every tab, like Gleason, He picked up every tab even though he didn't have any more money than anyone else. And one of the sweetest men in the world.
Who else? Keep going.
Dan Aykroyd, right away when you first met him, you knew he was a genius. He just had that look in his eye. He knew more information. When I first met Dan, he wanted to be an RCMP cop. He didn't, and he was always working on his truck. He had that stiff thing, and always hilarious and so inventive and so precise. Gilda Radner was someone who just every audience member fell in love with. She just exuded this thing and was so in the moment, a great improviser. Andrea Martin, Catherine O'Hara are as funny as women can be. And then that spawned people like Chevy and Steve Martin, and who are the endlessly inventive, endlessly creative. I think you're very lucky if you can work with great people in comedy. You do. There's no way you're going to. There's this innate competitiveness. You're not going to at least try to match their quality.
And when people identify you, depending on generation, with SNL and not SCTV, do you try to correct them? Do you think that's unfair, or do you just, que sera, sera?
Well, I did do both shows, and they're both wildly different. SCTV was a film show. It had the luxury of being able to take a 3-minute scene that wasn't quite working in editing, but making it into a brilliant 90-second promo. But it did not have the advantage of that live energy, live from New York. Which you can't duplicate on any level. But again, there are times on SNL where you'd say, when you look back at the scene and say, "Oh, if we'd only go in there and take that section out, wouldn't that be great?" So both shows had their advantages, but both shows were as thrilling to do as possible. And I did them back to back, which was kind of fabulous.
What happens to the brain chemical when the light comes on and you have to go on?
I think that you think about it and then you just stop thinking about it. There have been moments when I have done things where I've thought, oh, I'm going to do something. So I think that you plan things, but then when you get out there, they kind of evaporate and you become in the moment. But the planning gives you that security to know, well, you have something, but ideally you don't hit that something, but it gives you the confidence just to be in the moment.
This is a question always asked of entertainers. What about you would surprise us? That's a Jiminy Glick question.
Really, it is.
Isn't it?
Gee, it is like sitting with Glick.
Thanks.
Uh-huh. I would say, what is it about me? Well, very few people know that I can also sew beautifully. I don't know. what? I'm a seamstress. No, there's nothing. There's no surprises. And that's what's kept me out of the big money.
Oh,
Yeah.
I hear.
It's a limited, it's what you see is what you get. And unfortunately, this is it.